fun stuff. And I felt like, hey, nobody cares about live coding right now. So here we are now again. We're going to continue working on the useAuth library. Last time we were together, we got to the part where you can click login. Let me show you. You can click login, go through the login flow, and all of this is driven by XState. And we made it so that XState is controlling all of the state and the communication between different invocations of the useAuth, what's it called, hook, so that we're not using React context anymore to communicate state around the different components. It's all happening with XState actors or services or whatever you want to call them. Where this gets interesting though is that we still need the global auth provider. Let me show you. So we are still, if I open the example repository that we were messing around with, you'll see that it still has a global auth provider here. Where is it? On index, not in get. Why is what's going on? Okay, Gatsby browser. You see that it's still wrapping the entire tree in AuthProvider. The only reason the AuthProvider is here now is not the context stuff. It's because we had to find a way to configuration to the library. So what I'm going to try to do today is move all of this configuration into a special useAuth call that we can use to say, hey, use this configuration now. And I think that's going to make it work and easier to use. We'll see how it goes. We'll see if it's actually easier to use that way, but we are on a good path towards moving away from having an auth provider. Yeah. So, and if you are in the chat room, please say hi, because otherwise I have no idea if you're there and I can't say hi back to you. I think this is where real streamers have something called a Discord channel that's kind of connected. Hey, Magdi. That's connected to the live streams. I am way too lazy to actually set that up. So let's see, where were we? I'm going to close a bunch of these files because I'm not using them. And we're gonna go into the AuthProvider. No, that's the Auth Reducer. The AuthProvider TSX. We can go down here. We've commented out a lot of the stuff for the AuthProvider. I'm doing well, Magdi. I'm enjoying the crisp weather that's coming outside. And I'm happy that I'm finally back to live coding because it's honestly been a bit of a drag being away for a week and a half. How are you doing today? Hey, fish and chips. Oh man, I am now hungry. I had no idea I was going to be hungry on this stream. So the main thing we got to do now is move these auth options somewhere so that they auth0 next.js auth0. I have not seen that yet, Magdi. Is that a new thing? Those fuckers, how dare they? My library is way better than that. But yes, I haven't seen their official Next.js library yet. And the point here isn't to... The point is to move to build a library that people can use for other stuff. And that's part of the moving away from context and towards XState, because I think it's going to make it easier to implement other authentication providers. So what do we need? We need to go into the Auth Reducer. They might have what I'm trying to do, Magdi, but they don't have the ability to support multiple auth providers because that is not in their best interest. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to create a new action that we can use here. So if we are in the unauthenticated state, let's see, how should that work? We have this, and then we need to have an action that lets us add configuration to, or let's say add auth provider. I think that will, oh yes, that's, okay. I think I got it. We're not going to pass in configuration. We're going to pass in a configured auth provider. And that way you can use that auth provider to be anything as long as it replies to the same API that we have. And I think that's going to work. Okay, let's try that. So we're going to have useAuth here. UseAuth is going to return a function, and that function is going to be what? Let's see, we have the service, auth service. Why these are different? So I think that this may have been fixed already. This was a bug that we found. We're gonna deal with that some other time. Return to the homepage, handle authentication, sends login, does all of the auth stuff. So what we need is a function that adds the auth provider into our state context. So how do we do that? The auth provider is doing it here by instantiating the parameters, and I'm going to keep this so that we don't break backwards support. Yes. So without breaking backwards support, we're still going to have the auth provider as a way of setting the configuration, but it's going to do something differently here. Let's see. So we are no longer going to even set the context values, and we're going to comment this part out. So now most of this is disabled, which means we can just return the children because we don't have to wrap it in a context anymore. So without a context, what we are gonna have to do is run our service. So the same as useAuth here says use service. This is going to have to do the same thing. Get the params here. So we don't need the actual state. We do need to import use service from XState, and we need to import our auth service from the Auth Reducer file. And then here, when we configure auth 0, we are going to say event send as, what should the event be? The event should set, event send, which says, what should be our event? Let's see. Send, use callback. We are going to give it data. So we're gonna, wait, how are we using this elsewhere? Let me just send logout. Yep. Okay, so we're going to send configure at provider, set provider, and we're going to send auth 0 as our argument. And I think that's going to work. We need to do this in a use effect because it is a side effect after all, like this. And we do that when the component loads. Bam. Why auth 0 expected 1 argument but got 2. Why is that? Aha. Because, how are we doing it here? Oh, actually, do we get send out of dispatch? What does it give us? What does useAuth give us? I wonder if we can just use it. Send. Do we ever give that back? Send login. Event data. Send. Okay. Send. Do we give it back out? We don't. So let's actually give it back out. So useAuth, the hook, is now going to export send, and then we're going to here, we're going to say const send is going to be useAuth, and we need to import useAuth from our thing, and then here we're going to say send, and this needs to depend on property send does not exist on type. Yes. Okay. So we need to add that. Let's see, where's the type for it? So this is the type, and we're going to add it to the useAuth interface because we used to have dispatch here anyway. And should we call it dispatch? Does dispatch make more sense, or do you like send more? I feel like dispatch is a more typical word that people are like consumers of this library. I feel like would be more used to that. We're gonna call it send auth event. Yeah. Dispatch send auth event. Are we using auth dispatch anywhere? No, we're not, but we can take that away. So I'm gonna call it, yeah, I think Magdi, you're right. Dispatch will be more typical. So let's do dispatch and say that it's this. It doesn't return anything. And useAuth interface. It needs to export dispatch as send. Then actually we can just call it dispatch here as well. I think that might, wonder if that's going to make the code easier to read. Yeah, I think it will. So we're gonna say this is dispatch, 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 and we're gonna put dispatch in there, and then handle auth result is going to get dispatch, dispatch, dispatch. That's one of the nice things about using TypeScript, is that it's telling us all of these things. Dispatch, dispatch, dispatch. So we're basically we just have to go through all of the red squiggly lines, and magically our code base will most likely just work. Dispatch, 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 and set session interface needs to now have dispatch, dispatch, and we're gonna have to fix the any's, right? Is there anything else that is that needs to be fixed? Dispatch, dispatch. Any more squiggly lines? We don't need this anymore. Cool. So we can now go back into the AuthProvider here, and we say we get dispatch from useAuth, and we call it down here as dispatch set provider. Now we have to actually use that. Now we have to actually add that event thingy. Now, how do we do that? That is the question. Also, why is custom property namespace no longer used? And AuthProvider, what is this complaining about? Is not assigned. What? Return children. I don't. Why is this? What is this complaining about? AuthProvider interface. Children, children. That should all work. Okay, we'll figure that out in a bit. Why is navigate no longer used? Aha. Because navigate and custom property namespace were they were different parts of the configuration that are not captured in auth in the dispatch set provider. So we're going to have to add that as well somehow. Yeah, we are. Okay. So let's see. How do we do that? We're gonna put them here. Use effect when navigate or custom property namespace change. We're going to dispatch. Let's do it this way. Set navigate, which is going to be the navigate function, and we're going to have a similar use effect for the custom property namespace. Custom property namespace. Dispatch. Come on. Dispatch. Set. Set config. Set config. And we're going to send custom property namespace. And this is going to be easier to deal with. Set config. Navigate. And this is going to be set config as auth provider, which is going to be auth 0 in this case. And I think that's going to make all of this work better. So we're now going to have a set config action that accepts a property that needs to be configured and puts that into the state machine, updates the state machine, and then the state machine has access to all of this stuff. That's the theory. We'll see how it goes. Set config. And I think this use effect should probably run when params change. Yeah, it should. We can deal with that later. So we have that. Then we go into the Auth Reducer, which now needs a a set config action. And that action should work everywhere, which makes me think that it needs to be I feel like this needs to be a separate state machine so that we have two parallel machines that do one for configuration and one for the other stuff. Does that make sense or not? Actually, let's I'm going to do it the lazy way, and I'm going to add it here everywhere. So we're going to have a config which starts as an empty file or as an empty option, and then auth state we're going to add config, which is going to be for now something that has navigate, which is a function, and it needs to have a custom property namespace, which is a string, and an AuthProvider, which, let's see, is there auth 0? I'm gonna make it an any for now, and all of these any's should be fixed in the future, but I am a little lazy to do it now. Or not lazy, it's hard to fix every any when you don't have the time yet. Okay. Cool. So we have the config, and we're going to say set config is going to do what? It's going to run the actions for set config, and it's going to target self. I think we can target self. Do we have to target self? Maybe we don't need to target self. And I'm going to copy this everywhere so that you can set the configuration no matter which state the state machine is in. And if David is watching or decides to watch later, because mentioning XState tends to summon him, I apologize in advance for abusing state machines like this. I know that these should be two parallel state machines, but this is fine. Okay, so we're now calling setConfig. We now need to add the action that is called setConfig. SetConfig is going to be an assign action that gets the current context and the event that was sent, and does what? It's going to return the current context.config and the event dot error type, event dot error. Let's add in let's try, but console logging this is going to be annoying because we have to the development cycle I've created here is kind of a bitch. So we're returning the context, and the event is going to have a navigate function, a custom prop. Oh, okay. Function or undefined, string or undefined auth provider. Oh, cool. Okay. So it tells me what we have, which means we're going to do it like this. if we merge both of these together and see what happens. Now, why is this complaining? Set config assign parameter type partial has no properties in common with type partial. Type string navigate. Okay, we cannot do it that way. Can we do it this way at least? Oh, we need to. Got it. I know what we need to do. We can only set config, and then we have to say context.config and event. And now it's going to work, right? Because this way we're only changing the configuration part of the state machine app state. We're not changing all of the other parts. Now this, if I'm not mistaken, should just magically work. Oh, it's not going to magically work. We need to actually use these new values. So we're going to go down here, hydrate from local storage. Where are we calling that? Auth service.send. So this is supposed to do stuff. Okay, we're going to deal with that in a little bit. Now in the AuthProvider, we are setting all of these config variables. What is it complaining about? Type undefined is not assignable to type element. Okay, because we are returning a React node. What if we do it like this? I can't believe that makes it happy. Okay, so I just learned something interesting about React and TypeScript. React components don't let you return just children. You have to wrap those children in a fragment for TypeScript to be happy. No idea why. Okay, so we've got that. Oh, I know why. This is so that it ensures that what you're sending is what you're returning is always a React element, even if no children are defined. That makes sense. Okay, so we now have set config. We're doing the stuff. I'm going to add some console logs here so that we can see what's going on. Set config, and we're going to call it with context and event. Cool. And now I'm going to build this and publish a new version of the library, a new preview version of the library so that we can test it out. Git status, git commit -a -m, XState holds config as well. Okay, so we have that, and we say yarn build. This is going to build the library using microbundle, and then we can publish it to npm. And from there, we're going to install it in the example repo. What is it complaining about? Semantic error, JSX fragment is not supported when using JSX factory. What? AuthProvider TSX 99. AuthProvider TSX line 99. Okay, so what if we say react.fragment then? React.fragment, and I'm going to need to here in useAuth. I just realized we didn't actually start using all of the stuff that we moved out of context, so we should do that as well before we deploy stuff. So state, we're gonna say const AuthProvider equals state.context.config. We get the AuthProvider, and we do all of this stuff. If the AuthProvider exists, then we use it. Then we return to callback domain, which comes where? Where does callback domain come from? And we're also going to need navigate to come out of there. Say if navigate is defined. If navigate is defined, and actually we should always have navigate. That should never be optional, because that will make our life easier. So I'm going to go back into Auth Reducer, and I'm going to look at auth state. So navigate is going to be a function that always exists, which means we're going to have to define it here. And we're going to say navigate is going to be a, let's just console error. Please specify navigation method that works with your router. Okay, so we are now issuing an error if something is not defined. We can make that even easier for people to use. Also, my music died, which makes this feel really weird. So I'm gonna play some music. I don't know if you can hear my music, but I like having music on when I'm coding. Steppenwolf radio. All right, where was I? So we have navigate as always defined. Then we need the callback domain. AuthProvider logout. I'm gonna make this a little less loud. What did we do here? We added the callback domain to config as well. So we're gonna add it here too. We're gonna say if the callback domain changes, then we're going to dispatch set config with the callback domain, like that. Soccer Newfen, I'm still deciding on whether I prefer Next.js. Honestly, I think that Gatsby and Next.js solve very similar problems. I would use them for whatever they're good at. So I like Next.js when I'm building something that's a bit more like an app and has a lot more dynamic features, or especially when I need to create a lot of pages dynamically. Whereas I still prefer Gatsby for things that are more content-based and that are more about having a static represent. Wow, I am uploading at 20,000 kilobytes per second. That's insane. So So Soccer Newfen, I like both Next.js and Gatsby. I think they're way more similar than people think they are. And I just use them for different purposes. Next.js for more dynamic apps, Gatsby for more static website-y things. And other than that, how's my stream doing today, by the way? Can anyone tell me if there's been any lag or weird issues? I just wired up Ethernet to my office yesterday. I don't know why I waited a year to do that, but it seems to be working way better this way. And wow, 19,000 kilobytes per second upload? That's insane. So set config, we're gonna add the callback domain because we need to have the callback domain in as something that we sent to our thing. Why was I setting it as, oh, okay. Callback domain. Cool. Thank you, Soccer Newfen. That's a really cool nickname, by the way. How do you decide on that? So this is then going to take the callback domain out of config, and we need to add it to the types. Callback domain is a string. Can that be optional? No, that cannot be optional. It needs to be a string. But it needs to be optional because we don't have it by default. Rawr. How did I solve that before? No idea. Okay, so back to we don't need these guys. So we can go back to the Auth Reducer and say, actually, let's just set the callback domain to HTTP localhost 8000 by default. And then AuthProvider, TSX, where are you? Yeah, so you see our default was that before as well. And we always had the custom property namespace. So I'm gonna add that as a mandatory as well. Where am I? Auth Reducer. Sorry, I'm getting kind of lost in my files here. So we've got those two set up. I can now go to types and make both of them mandatory. We need to keep the auth provider as we need to keep the auth provider as potentially undefined because it is potentially undefined, and we're going to have to add some warnings around that. So we've got that. And now I can go back into my useAuth function, and we get the callback domain here. We pass it to the library when we are calling the auth provider. And then we need to call the auth provider here, and handle auth result needs to be auth provider as well. Auth provider, and then handle result interface needs to now accept the auth provider, not the other thing. And then set session, which is now getting the auth provider instead of auth0 directly, needs to also have its type updated. Auth provider, set session interface. So there's still some auth0 being hard-coded, but we're moving away from that. Set session auth0, this. Bam, bam, bam. Yes. Okay. So we've got the basics, I think, are set up. Custom property namespace needs to come out of the config. Look at that. Okay, so we should now be ready to actually test this. So git status, git commit -m, use auth provider from state machine. Bam. And then we say yarn build. Hopefully the build is going to succeed now. Ow. Okay, come on, build. Do it. Pa-pa-pam. Okay, that worked. Git commit -m. So Magdi, the other auth providers I was thinking about are primarily, the first one I want to do are Netlify, is the Netlify authentication thing. I want to add Amazon Cognito. I want to add the, what's it called? The Firebase auth, and potentially some others that I find. But I think those three would give me almost everything that people would want to use. I was going to update the version in package.json, build 090-7. Cool. And then we do npm publish. I'm going to take the auth key from my watch, and hopefully this is going to just work now. 788-749. Cool. Okay. Now here in useAuth Gatsby, say yarn add React useAuth pre-version 7. Thanks, Magdi. So I think people have been asking me how they can help out and add stuff. And after I figure out how to add the second auth provider, I think it's going to be way easier after that. This is one of those things where going from 1 to 2 is the hardest, and I'm working towards that now. But then adding third, fourth, and so on, I think will be easier for other people to contribute. And Soccer Newfen, I am using Team UI. It's just that this example was built before I knew about Team UI. I think it's using Rebus, which is actually a precursor to Team UI. All right, so we've got this. Let's see if we get any console logs for the configuration and if logging in works at all. So we get set configs. Nice. All of that worked. So that means we should be able to log in. Well, it didn't work. That's for sure. Set config, callback domain, error undefined. Okay. Huh. So what happened here? Why didn't this work? What can we do here? Let's see. So that's one of the yeah. One of the problems here is that I don't know what's going on, what's going wrong. Oh, Magdi, what are you doing with Shopify? How can we, let's try adding, okay, so I'm going to open the library itself now. First of all, I'm going to go into node modules and we're going to do some hacking around the installed library directly. Nice. Magdi, that sounds like a way better use of time than doing open source. So I'm going to delete, let's see, let's delete the modern one because those are useless. And we're going to delete MJS ones as well. And then what else remains? Index modern. Oh, I'm LSing it, not removing them. RM node modules, React useAuth dist. So what we're doing here is forcing Gatsby to load a specific version of the library so that we can hack around it. So index.js, index module should also be deleted. And now we're going to open index.js. Here, use auth Gatsby. I'm going to sort by names to make my life easier. We scroll down to React. Where are you? React use auth. React, come on. ABC, React. Come on. React DOM, React use auth. And I'm gonna go into dist and run in open index.js. And we're gonna see what's in here. So this is a really big file. I'm gonna let Prettier run the stuff. Prettier doesn't wanna do that. So I'm going to copy it into a new file, save, and save it as a JS file on my desktop, blah.js. This is going to give me prettification, right? Yes. Okay, so we prettified it. Now we're going to, what was I gonna say? Now we're going to add some console logs so that we can see what's actually going on. First, we need to figure out the, oh my God, bird. By the way, can you hear my bird screaming in the background? He seems very bored with me. So I am looking for a, let's see, I'm looking for how to add a console log to this compile thing so that we can always see the current context. Let's see, use auth, that's the machine. All of the config stuff is there. We have the console log here. How loud is the bird in the background, by the way? Use service, I think this is, yes, this is use auth. So use auth should be able to context R. Okay, so here we're going to console log r.context every time that use auth loads. Let's see if that works. App state our context, and we run Gatsby. and see if we get a console log about that. Okay, Gatsby, you can do it. Bam, run. Nope, I was still building development bundle. Okay, come on. There we go. So we're gonna go back. Oh, nice. We do get a lot of console logs. That's good. That's great. We added it to the right place. So now let's see. The final app state is that we have the config. We have an AuthProvider, which is our Auth0 thing. We have the callback domain, localhost 8000, which should be correct. Custom property namespace is undefined, which should still be correct, I think. Although, no, it should not. It should be here. If we look at Gatsby browser, we're actually, no, we're not setting it. So it should be fine. Cool. But the callback domain didn't get set. Interesting. I think that's because we're on localhost. Nice. Awesome. So the main reason you guys are saying that you can't hear the bird in a disruptive way is this new microphone. It does have a lot of audio equipment now perfectly configured, so you can't hear the bird as much. Okay. Now, why does the app state, so we have config, what is the user? The user is empty, right? So now we click login, we get the callback, and why is it not getting set? That's the confusing part. What if we try to go on a incognito browser so that it actually asks us to log in? Let's see what happens then. Login. Swizzards, blah, login. And stuff didn't happen. Did we get anything set in local storage? We should, no. Something isn't getting called, but I'm not sure what. So let's try to figure that out. Here, when we go on the Auth0 callback page, here we call handle authentication. Does this happen? Hello, we are trying to handle authentication. Let's see if that happens. Login. Oh, right. Something went wrong. Yes, because we used up our thing, or we used up the tokens that were in the URL. I tried just linking the library locally, Mehdi, and it hits the problem where, what was I going to say? It has the problem that it's, basically, it runs into the issue of having two instances of React running at the same time and just doesn't work. So that's why, yeah, it's a weird issue that happens sometimes when you're yarn linking stuff, that where both libraries or both projects import React gets confused and throws errors. All right. So we are coming here. We are trying to call handle authentication. Now I gotta figure out what handle authentication is here. So we are returning handle authentication f login. Let's see, console. Oh, let's add a debugger. No, debugger is going to be annoying to use. Let's console log here, and we're going to say we are doing what? Handling auth, and we're going to console log the current context. Actually, yeah, let's add debugger here. So debugger is gonna go localhost 8000. That loads, we click login, go through the flow, come back to the debugger. And now what we can do is check, first of all, what is in R. No, it's no longer R. What is the R equals void blah? It's U now. No, U is the is the Auth0 thingy, I think. But U is undefined. That's interesting. Why is U undefined? So I think that's the problem. We are trying to handle authentication before we have the configuration set up. Yes, I think that's what's going to happen. If we keep going, yeah, you see, we try to run it here, but then configuration happens down here. So we got to figure out when we come back from the reloads, how can we ensure that we are running the effect of authenticating you after all of the configuration is set. And that also makes using this library without an auth provider a lot harder. So we're going to go back to the original code here. And let's see. We return handle authentication, which how can we make sure that this waits until the configuration is done? Because AuthProvider is now doing all of this stuff, takes useAuth and then runs these 4 effects. And we need all of these effects to have run before we can actually handle the authentication callback, which makes this a really interesting problem. The reason it worked before was because we instantiated everything in the provider, so it was ready by the time we got to the problem domain, or not to back before we you know what I mean. So we need this to be in the configured state, or it needs to defer. So use auth here where it's calling handle authentication. I wonder if we can do something dirty. Like we could just wait until this is done, or we could set a global lock would be an interesting way to solve this. I feel like there's already a solution in XState, but async stuff. Let's see, does XState let us schedule events for later? Schedule batched events. No. Defer events. Batched events, activities, state nodes. Let's see. The following options can be passed. Defer events signifies whether events sent to an uninitialized service prior to calling should be deferred until the service is initialized. That makes sense. Yeah. Making the event depending on another event would also work, but then it would mean that you can't set the configuration everywhere. Let's see. Because the configuration being set isn't an actual state. We just kind of set it in the actions, or we set the values in context, but we don't treat that as a separate XState state, if that makes sense. So what we can do, mm, so we do need to call handle authentication here. When auth callback comes back, we take useAuth and we handle the authentication. But that's not guaranteeing that everything is actually configured. So this is going to be both annoying from a user perspective and it's annoying for us. What we can do is, no, that needs to be, I wonder if we can defer it here. But how would we defer it? It needs to make sure that the auth provider is defined. What can we do? Here's what we can do. We're going to dispatch login, and then we're going to say if the auth provider is not defined, we're going to go into a loop. So we can say set timeout. Is setting a timeout a good option here? No. I'm going to say window dot request animation frame, and it's going to call handle authentication again using the post login route if it exists. Okay. Now this could be an infinite loop. So we need to add something that stops this from looping infinitely. How do we do that? Let's add a beep. Let's see. We're going to say call count, which is going to be 0, and we're going to call it with call count is call count plus 1, and then call count if no auth provider, and call count is less than, let's say, 5, else if there's, let's do it in here. So if there's no auth provider, then if call count is less than 5, else we're going to console error, auth provider not configured. Please ensure you send the correct set config events. Come on, save. Okay, so I'm going to now build this again, and we're going to try it again. Yarn build and make a new version. And I'm going to have to, after this works, hi Bert, I'm going to have to stop live coding and get to work on some other stuff. Come on. Mm-hmm. All right, got that. And then we go into package.json. We make this 0908. Build 0908. Oh, interesting. What do you mean by resolutions in my package.json file, Mehdi? With fix for, what was it? For handle authentication. And then we say npm publish, get my thing. Mm-hmm. And then we yarn add the newer version. Oh, interesting. Okay, I'm gonna have to look into that. Thanks, Magdi. Yarn start. Let's see if this just magically works now, which I hope it will. Mm-hmm. Okay, in progress, building development bundle. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so we go here. Now let's see if we're going to successfully log in. Log in. Come back. Ooh, cannot read parse hash of undefined. Nice. All right. So what went wrong? We got all of the set configs. And then did the user ever get set? Nope. Interesting. Okay, so this is proving to be way more challenging than I thought it was, but I'm gonna have to go work on some other stuff. So thanks everyone for watching. I'm gonna try to figure out how to solve this off stream later this week. And there's going to be a write-up about today's stream out probably on Tuesday. So yeah, thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you again on Wednesday. Bye.